So how do you determine what the best course of action is for each client?
Sure. So litigation, for starters, is never the first or best course of action. And I think that's the most important thing to remember.
So it's like avoid the war.
Yeah.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, no, exactly. Or have the fight, but have the smart fight.
Okay.
Right, beforehand. Honestly, if the first advice anyone gets is litigate, it's already a problem because a very few cases lend themselves only to litigation as being the only solution. I'm not saying all, but like there are cases where you look at this and you're like,
is that what they mean by settle out of court?
Yes. But it's also with the art of negotiation, there's all these things, approaches that a person can take. And again, it's about managing your environment, right? And it depends on the type of case. So some cases, again, if they're highly emotive, it's about actually being able to have the conversation with the client to try to bring the emotion down. It's also about trying to find out how you're going to do that to the other side as well. Because if both parties are emotive, you need to try calm the situation down because you're not going to get any resolve. Right? And sometimes the solution is to start litigation because once it gets real, then emotions go down. So again, litigation has a purpose, but it's not just about, for example, getting a court order at the end. You try the different avenues to see what you can do. And believe it or not, 80% of the time, you can get the solution that the client wants, the full solution without compromise, just by communicating it properly because there's misunderstandings. So as an example, imagine that you want 5 things, right? But two of them really aren't that important. But you tell this guy, I want 5 things. Yeah. Now, this guy on these 2 things is where he gets emotive. He's angry now because he doesn't want to give you these 2. No one has communicated that your priority of those 2 things are irrelevant. Or like you've just said them and you would have thought that somebody would have communicated back. But you said it, he says no. And that's where the conversation ends. And now you phone your attorney and go, what do I do? Now let's sue. Sometimes it is about having the conversation going, oh, but this isn't important. And he goes, oh, well, if that's not important, I'm okay with the other 3. That's perfect.
Right.
And everyone actually manages to walk away. So that communication, mediation, like, it's key. So
does that mean it's best to stay out of court as much as you can in that case?
Court's expensive. There's certain matters where you can't.
And perhaps maybe tell the people that are watching what litigation is. I mean, you and I might be speaking because we understand what exactly we're talking about. Yeah. But there are some people watching thinking, what exactly is litigation?
No, fair enough.
Yeah.
Look, so the court process in general, there's different ways that we approach court as attorneys, but we don't necessarily need to go into the detail of that. But ultimately, litigation normally starts with a set of papers that are drafted. These set of papers set out your client's case. Right. So whether it's a plaintiff or an applicant, doesn't matter. You set out your client's case in these papers and you take it to the court gives it a number and you take it to the person that you're suing potentially and you give it to them, right? The sheriff does that. Summons or application, right? Now, the sheriff does that and if I'm suing you, you get this from the sheriff and you read it and it says there, it's a notice and it says that you've got X amount of days to do this and X amount of days to do this. Now it's your turn to reply to this, right? One way or another, you have to answer to it. And then usually under, whether it's a summons, whether it's an application, I've also then got the right to reply to that. And by that point, you start getting ready for court. If it's an application, it works very differently. An application, basically, everything gets done on papers. So when you get to the court, you don't call witnesses, you don't cross-examine, you don't do the few good men thing. It's just about getting up. It's actually quite boring for anyone watching. I've had clients going, no, but I want to go to court and see you win. And they sit there and they realize it's not that exciting. So like application.
There's no drama like there is on TV.
Drama. You get up. The judge sometimes makes people sit down when they get up too much and that's it. And the case is heard. And a lot of the times it's postponed or whatever the case is.
Lots of postponements, eh?
Yeah, but there's a reason for that, and I'm sure we're going to get to that when we speak about evictions as the one type of litigation. Summons ends in trial. So that's what people perceive as the more exciting version of court. So that's where you put people up in a witness box and you ask them questions, and then the other guy cross-examines them, and people cry, and that sort of thing. But so that's litigation. So it's one or the other. Either way, you go in front of a judge or a magistrate, and they grant some form of order, and that order gets executed afterwards. So that's the meaning of litigation.
Mm. Okay, and then can you share like a successful litigation strategy that you've employed in the past?
So aside from that example that I already gave you, with evictions specifically, and now I'm mentioning evictions because this obviously we're speaking about property.
Correct.
And if we consider litigation and we consider one of the most common forms in the property space, it would have to be evictions, right? All the other ones are fairly unique.
Or someone not fulfilling their responsibilities in an agreement of sale.
So that is less common, but yes. So that is actually quite an easy one, fortunately. So every one that we've done where we've compelled someone to sell a property, it's been relatively easy.
Sure.
As long as all the suspensive conditions.
Because I've seen people sign deals and then they're like, "Nah, I'm not selling anymore." I'm like, "No, you signed the contract.
It's actually,
what do you mean you're not selling anymore?"
It's actually one of the most pleasant forms of litigation for me, because even the cost I get to collect later from the seller. Because remember, we're paying the purchase price. Well, I'm assuming now my client's the purchaser. We're paying the purchase price. We issue a guarantee. We're happy to pay. Now he says, no, he doesn't want to sell. You go to court, I barely think twice about it. You go to court, application to
compel. So that one is straight litigation. You don't even waste your time. You go.
Because obviously I try to persuade him. But the reality is the seller has more to lose than the purchaser, because we have the money. So at the end of the day, whatever cost order we get, because the chances of winning, I wouldn't go to court if I think we're going to lose. So the chances of winning are high, and whatever I spend, I get to collect from you. So the more you fight, the more you're going to land up paying out of the purchase price. So it's one of those matters where the seller lands up digging their own grave, as a figure of speech, because you've got all the recourse, and the collectability of those costs are they're there because you've got the purchase price. You get that court order, conveyancer holds it, and the court order specifically says deducted from the purchase price, and you hand it over to the conveyancer and you force the transaction. And the court orders at the end is basically the sheriff signing the documents on behalf of the seller. So you don't even need him to sign things anymore. The sheriff signs it.